Title: Meet the most dangerous women in Ohio's prisons. Help this channel grow. Like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories. This helps us a lot. Thank you. The story begins. Before we begin, understand this: the stories you are about to hear are not fiction. They are real lives, real crimes, and real consequences, locked away from the world. The darkness you are about to witness is human nature at its most raw and unfiltered. If you have the stomach for the truth, then keep watching. And if you think you can handle more, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because the abyss we are about to explore only gets deeper. The first thing that hits you is the sound. Not a loud, clanging noise, but a low, constant hum of contained humanity. It's the sound of locked doors, shuffling feet in identical shoes, and murmured conversations that never rise above a certain, institutional pitch. This is the Indiana Women's Prison, a place where over 1,800 women have had their freedom stripped away, many for acts of violence so brutal they defy the very concept of the gentler sex. I stood just inside the secure intake area, watching a new arrival. She couldn't have been older than 25, her eyes wide with a deer-in-the-headlights terror that was already hardening into a shell of resignation. An officer with a face worn smooth by routine rolled her fingerprints. "Right thumb," he said, his voice devoid of inflection. She complied, her hand trembling slightly. This was her new normal, a styrofoam cup with her name on it, a strict no-touch policy, and a life governed by bells and counts. She was here for possession, she'd mumbled. An addict since 17. A mother of 4. The system had already labeled her, filed her, and processed her. But behind the charge sheet was a story, a cascade of bad decisions and broken circumstances that led to this sterile, echoing room. My guide, Sergeant McPherson, a woman with 2 decades of steel in her eyes, led me deeper into the facility. "You see all types in here," she said, her voice low. "The ones who cry, the ones who posture, and the ones who just calculate." We were heading away from the general population, towards a place even other inmates spoke of in hushed tones, the Administrative Segregation Unit. "This is where we house our disciplinary cases," McPherson explained. "The ones who can't, or won't, follow the rules. They spend 23 hours a day in their cells. No contact. It's for them, and for us." The air in the seg unit was different. Colder. The hum of the main prison was replaced by an eerie silence, punctuated by the occasional metallic clang from deep within the corridor. We stopped at a solid steel door with a narrow, reinforced window. "This one," McPherson said, her keys jangling, "has been in here for nearly 5 years. Not for her original crime. For the embarrassment she caused." The door unlocked with a heavy thunk. Inside, the cell was a study in stark minimalism, a concrete bed, a sink-toilet combination, and a single woman sitting with a posture of unnerving calm. This was Sarah Pender. Her case file was a prosecutor's dream and a psychologist's nightmare. Convicted as an accomplice in the double murder of her housemates, a couple shot to death in a drug-related dispute. The prosecution argued she didn't pull the trigger but masterminded the whole thing, manipulating her boyfriend into becoming the weapon. She was charismatic, intelligent, and, according to the state, possessed a Charles Manson-like ability to manipulate. But her notoriety skyrocketed years after her conviction. In 2008, she simply vanished from the Rockville Correctional Facility. "Why do you think they have given you this long sentence in segregation?" I asked her, the small recording device between us feeling inadequate in the face of such contained intensity. Sarah's smile was thin, devoid of warmth. "Because I embarrassed them." "How did you embarrass them?" "Well," she said, a flicker of pride in her eyes, "I escaped from what was supposed to be a maximum security prison." The story she told was audacious. It didn't involve tunnels or elaborate schemes. It involved a profound understanding of human weakness. She'd identified a corrections officer, Scott Spittler, a man she described as having problems at home. She cultivated him, first through small contraband, then through a sexual relationship. She built him up, made him feel seen and powerful, all while siphoning money from her illicit trade to fund her escape. He found out I was planning to go, she explained, her tone almost conversational. And he saw an opportunity. He said, "What if I could just roll you out of here?" And that's exactly what happened. One evening, she changed into civilian clothes, hid her prison uniform in a ceiling tile, and slipped out a back door of a recreation building. The alarms, mysteriously, failed to sound. Officer Spittler was waiting in a state-owned transportation van. Sarah Pender crouched in the back, and he simply drove her out the front gate. For over 4 months, she was a ghost, labeled America's Most Wanted Woman by the U.S. Marshals. Back in Sergeant McPherson's office, the veteran officer's face was grim. "She preyed on him," McPherson stated flatly. "He was having problems at home, and she made him feel she was going to save him. That she would be his everything. He was so vulnerable, he fell for it. He fell in love with her." "And she?" I asked. "She was never in love with him," McPherson replied, her voice dropping to a whisper. "She used him. She is, without a doubt, one of the best manipulators I have ever seen in over 20 years. If you can convince a trained corrections officer to drive you out of a maximum security facility, you can convince anyone to do anything. The state of Indiana made sure she would never get the chance to test that theory again." Upon her recapture, Sarah Pender was thrown into the hole, where she has remained, a permanent resident of a concrete box, a living testament to the danger that festered not in physical strength, but in a chilling, calculated intelligence. But as I left the SEG unit, the echo of that heavy door closing behind me, I knew Sarah's story was only the most extreme example. The prison was a tapestry of shattered lives and dark choices. I thought of Addie, a young mother in for strong-arm robbery, trying to control a rage that had defined her since childhood. I thought of Martha, who had spent 20 years inside and was now terrified of an outside world with iPods and Google, a world that had moved on without her. Each woman was a story, a case file, a warning. The tour continued, but my mind kept returning to Sarah Pender's calm, analytical eyes. She had looked at a system designed to break people and found a single, fragile crack, a lonely man's heart. She exploited it with the precision of a surgeon. And as I walked through the crowded cafeteria, watching hundreds of women eat their soggy chicken patties and watery gravy, I couldn't shake one terrifying thought, a thought that would haunt the investigators for years. If Sarah Pender's manipulation could breach prison walls from the inside, what other secrets was she still capable of hiding? The official story was that she had planned the escape for freedom. But what if that was only a partial truth? What if the escape, the relationship with the guard, was merely a move in a much larger, darker game that nobody had even begun to understand? The door to her cell may have been locked, but the mystery of Sarah Pender was still very much alive. The general population of the prison was a world away from the silent, concrete isolation of segregation. Here, the air was thick with the scent of disinfectant and simmering tension. It was a society of its own, with unwritten rules, fragile alliances, and relationships that bloomed in the barren soil of incarceration. I found Addie Hartz in her unit, her earlier bravado now softened by the relentless routine. She was crafting a card, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Mother's Day," she said, without looking up. "Gotta get them out." When I asked if her own mother visited, her hands stilled. "No. She lives in a state. She's never come." The words were flat, a simple statement of a complex, festering hurt. She was in prison, too. Attempted murder and aggravated robbery. The cycle was as clear as it was tragic. Addie was a product of her environment, fighting an anger she inherited, desperate to break the chain for her own 2 young daughters. Her sentence was 16 years, but the real prison was the legacy she carried. Later, in the cavernous, noisy mess hall, I sat with Addie and her friend, a woman named Queenie. The food was as unappetizing as promised, but the conversation was a raw glimpse into survival. "This is a no-touch facility," Queenie explained, as Addie eagerly forked the cabbage from my tray onto her own. "We're not supposed to hug. But we do. I feel like women need the comfort of, hey, it's going to be all right. You can tell me all day, but if you touch me," she trailed off, the unspoken need hanging in the air. This need for connection, for a sliver of humanity in a dehumanizing place, often took a deeper turn. In the SEG unit, I had spoken with Desiree Hancock, an armed robber and a close friend of Sarah Pender. Shackled and escorted even to the shower, Desiree's world was one of extreme limitation, but her emotions were not. "You mentioned your girlfriend," I had asked her. "How close do these relationships get?" Desiree didn't hesitate. "They get pretty deep. A lot of women don't come in here gay. I wasn't when I came to prison. But I am now." She was matter of fact, her gaze steady. "You discovered that here?" I pressed. "Loneliness is what started it," she confessed. And then, one thing led to another. And it may seem fake on the outside, but the emotions and feelings are real. She spoke of 2 great loves within the prison walls, both of which she damaged by being a cheater, a liar. Her explanation was a stark summary of the distorted reality inside. "It's like being a kid in a candy store. It's not just one. It's 740 girls. And out of 740, probably only 40 are gay. The rest of them? This is the gayest place on earth." This intricate, often volatile, web of relationships was the undercurrent that ran beneath the prison's sterile surface. It was a world Sergeant McPherson and her team monitored constantly, knowing that a perceived betrayal over a relationship could ignite violence as quickly as a gang dispute. But for all the drama, there were also quiet stories of hope and impending freedom. Martha Search, who had served nearly 20 years, was counting down the days until her release. Her excitement was tinged with a palpable fear. She spoke of being struck by things like iPods and cell phones during a hospital trip, of having to have an officer explain the world to her. Her biggest worry was for her 2 daughters, whom she hadn't seen in over a decade. "I've told my children that you might still see a little prison in me," she said, a heartbreaking smile on her face. "I might look at the clock and think it's count time." But her dream was simple, pure. A bed of my own. "I feel it might show me how a little bit of heaven would feel." It was during a follow-up interview with Sarah Pender that the narrative I'd constructed began to fracture. I wanted to understand the root of the manipulation, to trace it back to the double murder that landed her here. She was articulate, self-possessed, and frustratingly persuasive. "The thing I have always got from our conversations," I began, "is that you're not typical of the people in this prison." "I would agree," she said calmly. "I have a wider worldview. I'm generally more educated. I have about 5 years of college." "Then why did you choose the path that ended you up here?" Her answer was a masterclass in deflection wrapped in a kernel of truth. "It was an emotional attachment to someone," she said, referring to her co-defendant, Richard Hull. "When I found out he dealt drugs, I accepted it because I didn't want to lose him." She painted herself as naive, a woman in love who thought she could change a bad boy. She admitted to buying the shotgun used in the murders, a stunning admission she tried to frame as a simple act of devotion. "He told me I was the only person without a criminal background. Being left alone frightened me more than whatever consequences would come from purchasing a firearm." But when I steered the conversation back to the victims, the couple shot to death in their home, a crack appeared in her polished facade. "I think about them all the time," she said, her voice dropping. "The woman had 3 kids, they were still people, and they have families that love them, and they can't ever get those people back." For a moment, the calculated manipulator was gone, and in her place was a woman confronting the horrifying, irreversible weight of her actions. It was the most human I had seen her. But the moment passed as quickly as it came. When I asked why the jury found her guilty of murder, not just accessory, she retreated back into her narrative of persecution. The prosecutor's theory was that I had manipulated Richard into murdering the victims, that I wanted them out of my house. She looked at me, her eyes clear and unwavering. You are being perceived as a two-faced manipulator. Yeah. Which is a really hard label to carry. Leaving her cell, I felt a profound sense of unease. She was so convincing. Was she a master manipulator, or a tragically complicit woman burdened with a monstrous label? The line was terrifyingly blurry. Later that evening, I was reviewing my notes with Lieutenant Brad Gray, the officer who had been on duty the night of Sarah's escape from Rockville. His face was still etched with the shame of it. "She'd proven herself to be that time and time again," he said, his voice gruff. "If you can convince an officer, someone who was trained not to do this, to drive you out of a correctional facility, you can convince anybody to do anything." His words should have sealed it. But they only amplified my doubt. As I prepared to leave the prison for the night, a junior corrections officer approached me, looking nervous. "Sir. About the Pender case, there's something you should know. Something that never made the official report from her time at Rockville." He glanced over his shoulder. The officer she manipulated, Spittler, he didn't just help her escape for money or sex. Before she left, she had him make a phone call for her. Just one. To a number we never could trace. The air grew cold. "What did she have him say?" I asked. The young officer's face was pale. "It was just one sentence. He told the person on the other end, the package is ready for delivery." We always assumed the package was her. That she was escaping to someone. But after she was caught, she was alone. We never found who that call was meant for. A chilling realization began to dawn. Her escape wasn't an end goal. It was a means to something else. The manipulation of Officer Spittler, the cryptic phone call, it wasn't just a plan for freedom. It was the first step of a different plan entirely. Sarah Pender hadn't just been escaping from prison. She had been escaping to someone, or something, and that mission, whatever it was, remained dangerously, terrifyingly incomplete. The cryptic message, "The package is ready for delivery," echoed in my mind, transforming the sterile prison corridors into a labyrinth of hidden intentions. Sarah Pender's escape was not an act of desperate flight, it was a strategic maneuver. But for what? The official narrative of a woman simply craving freedom shattered, replaced by the chilling probability that her breakout was the opening move in a darker, unfinished game. I needed to go back to the beginning, to the double murder that started it all. The victims, Andrew Cataldi and Tricia Irwin, weren't just random housemates. They were low-level players in a sprawling Midwestern drug network, a fact the prosecution had used to paint the murders as a ruthless turf grab. Richard Hull, the triggerman, was a known enforcer. But what was Pender's real role? A jilted lover and aspiring chemist from a good family, she was the anomaly in this violent equation. Digging through old trial transcripts with a new, urgent perspective, a discarded piece of testimony caught my eye. A forensics expert mentioned trace amounts of an unusual chemical compound found on Pender's clothing, dismissed at the time as contamination from a university lab. But the compound, a precursor to a highly addictive synthetic opioid, was the same one that would flood the streets of Indiana and Illinois in the months following her incarceration. The distribution network was ruthlessly efficient, and it seemed to anticipate law enforcement moves with an almost prescient clarity. The pieces began to click into a horrifying mosaic. Sarah Pender wasn't just a manipulator of people, she was a manipulator of a system. Her relationship with Richard Hull wasn't just about codependency, it was a business partnership. She was the architect, using her chemistry knowledge to design a new, potent product, while Hull and the others were the blunt force instruments. The murders weren't just about removing housemates, they were about consolidating control and eliminating loose ends within their own nascent operation. Her imprisonment didn't stop her. It became her new headquarters. From the inside, she was untouchable, a ghost directing the symphony. The contraband ring she ran with Officer Spittler wasn't just for escape money, it was a test of logistics, a trial run for moving product. And then she executed her masterstroke, the escape. The phone call Spittler made wasn't about her freedom. "The package is ready for delivery" was a command. The package wasn't Sarah Pender, it was the finalized formula for her synthetic opioid, the key to a drug empire. She wasn't escaping to freedom, she was escaping to a clandestine meeting to hand it off, to launch her product into the world personally. Her 4 months on the run weren't spent hiding, they were spent orchestrating the initial rollout. Her recapture was a setback, not a defeat. Thrown into the hole, cut off from the world, she was presumed neutralized. But she had planned for this, too. The final, shocking piece of the puzzle came from a seemingly unrelated source, Desiree Hancock, her friend in the SEG unit. During a final, monitored conversation, Desiree, who saw Pender as a mentor, let a telling detail slip. "She's always writing," Desiree said idly. "Letters. Says it's for her appeals. But she uses this tiny writing. Fills every inch of the paper." The method was ancient, but effective, steganography. Hiding a message in plain sight. Pender's prolific legal correspondence, her endless appeals and motions, weren't attempts to overturn her sentence. They were her new distribution network. The dense, legally formatted text was a carrier. Hidden within it, in a microscopic cipher, were her ongoing commands, her adjustments to the formula, and her strategic directives to the network she still controlled from her concrete tomb. The prison censors, looking for overt threats or gang codes, never saw it. They were reading the wrong language. The truth was now terrifyingly clear. The most dangerous woman in America's prisons wasn't dangerous because of the crimes she had committed, but because of the one she was still perpetrating. She had engineered a system where her physical incarceration was irrelevant. The violence, the manipulation, the escape, it was all a smokescreen for her real legacy, a drug epidemic that was tearing communities apart, born from the mind of a woman who had turned the prison itself into her command center. She wasn't a prisoner, she was a CEO running a multi-million-dollar, body-count enterprise from solitary confinement. The story you thought you knew is a lie. The charming manipulator, the tragic figure, the escaped convict, they are all carefully constructed masks. The real Sarah Pender is a pioneer of a new kind of crime, one where the walls are no longer a barrier. She proved that the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun or a knife, but a brilliant, immoral mind that can see the system not as an obstacle, but as a tool. And as long as she can get a pen and paper, the delivery of her poisonous packages will never, ever stop. The case is closed for the courts, but her real sentence on the outside is still being served, one overdose at a time.